Thousand Autumns, is a Meng Xi Shi novel. This is an audiobook made by fans for other fans. Disclaimer. The main couple of the story is made up of two men. If you don't like it, don't listen. Thank you. Remember, subscribe and click the bell to stay updated on all the new releases. Enjoy. Chapter 72. Wuxia was situated in northern Wei, right at the source of the Wuxia River, hence the name, Wuxia. In reality, the seat of its local government was called Xianguo, but everyone had long gotten used to grouping it with Wuxia River and calling them Wuxia City. The city was certainly not comparable to Chang'an, but it could be considered a strategic town to the west. If northern Zhou and Tuyuan were to go to war, then this area would be situated on the military front. However, there was no such danger for this moment of time. Since it was not yet the beginning of spring, the weather had yet to warm, the merchants passing through here were few in number, and so Wuxia city was continuing as it always was, tranquil and peaceful. Early in the morning, Qing took a broom and headed towards the gate. It snowed just the day before, so naturally he had to sweep the area clean. Else Wubo would slip and fall once he came home from getting the groceries. He hummed a little tune that only he knew to be offbeat, with a melody that only he could understand. The only thought in his mind was to quickly finish clearing the snow at the gate, as he had to go to the rear court and check if that yellow cat was there. Most days it ran to their room where they stored firewood so as to avoid the cold. If it was there, then Qing would bring it some food. The night before had been a scene of heavy snow. A thick layer had accumulated by the gate, as expected. Every now and again, a big pile of snow would slide down from the rooftops with a loud pop. At this moment, Qing had already given a good sweep around the courtyard. He was exhausted, but he wasn't very cold. His breaths had just become heavy, so he took a break. He had suddenly looked up, and was met with two people walking by down the street. Qing's attention first fell upon the man wearing bluish-green clothes. From far off, he could not make out the man's features, but the way this man carried himself already gave Qing the sense that he was not an ordinary person. Qing felt that it was difficult for him to find a suitable word to describe him. If he had to find one, then he thought of the lianggao he ate in the summer, white as snow, pure and transparent, its essence penetrating deeply into the heart. One only had to look at it, let alone eat it, to feel inexplicably at ease. Once they had grown nearer, he realized that likening the man to lianggao was actually quite fitting. Qing had never seen such a handsome and beautiful man. The moment he laid eyes on him, he had begun to stare blankly, up until he realized that these two people were walking in his direction, and growing closer still, before he recovered his composure. The lianggao no, the man carrying the long cloth bag on his back, had approached Qing and cupped his hands. "Excuse me, but is this the Xia residence?" Had it been before, Qing certainly would have turned and said to him, "The characters for Xia residence are written right on top of the roof, and real big at that. What, are you blind or illiterate? Why would you ask a question with such a clear answer?" But this time, not only did he not say such cutting words, but his face had even grown red. Normally, he was quick with his words and would vanish without a trace. However, he could now only stammer out, "But I don't know who you are." "Young Lang Jun, you are also a member of this residence, aren't you?" the other man asked, smiling politely as he did. Qing only felt as though half of his bones had gone weak. At that moment, a voice came from beside the man in teal, sounding as though within it carried a sneer, "Qiao. If you ask all slow like that, when are you going to ever get the entire question out? Just have him bring Lao Wu out, and tell him that his master's here. Ah Ching's attention finally fell upon the person who had come along with the man in teal. It was a woman in a long skirt, wearing a mi-li that made it so that her features were unclear. Naturally, women from closer to the border were very tall and slim. However, one could not describe this woman as tall and slim. She seemed to have the height and figure of a man. Women like that were very rare indeed. And her voice was not exactly unpleasant to hear, but it absolutely was not a clear and gentle voice that women typically had. Ah Ching was a little confused. "Are you sure you didn't get the wrong place? Our master, the Lang Jun of the Xia residence, left many years ago to travel far away. Up until now he has yet to return." Before Shen Qiao could inquire further, Yan Wushi had tossed something to the boy. Ah Ching subconsciously caught it. He looked down and found that it was a piece of topaz, hardly half the size of his palm. However, the carving upon it was exquisite and fine, a moon shining through the narrow branches of trees, enclosed by the mist of Kunlun mountains. "Give it to Wu Mi, and have him come see me," said the woman, who was completely unlike a woman. Ah Ching suddenly gave a start. He remembered that Wu Bo had once explained this to him, and finally understood exactly who this person before him was. He said not another word before turning right around and running back inside and closing the gate behind him, leaving Shen Qiao and Yan Wushi outside. He was unexpectedly quite vigilant. A pity though that he had yet to attune his senses, leaving much of his behavior to appear rather childish and naive to any observer. The two of them stood outside for some time, before seeing the gate open once more. An elderly man of about 60 years old came out, and behind him was the boy from earlier. The old man glanced past Shen Qiao before his gaze fell upon Yan Wushi, who was wearing the mi-li. "Zuoren." Yan Wushi responded with an N. It was only an N, but the old man couldn't possibly have mistaken it for anyone else. He was overjoyed to the point that he was just about to salute him right there. However, after taking several steps forward, he seemed to resist from doing so and instead hurried them inside. "Please do come in first, we'll talk once you do." Ah Ching followed Wu Bo from behind, scrutinizing the two men curiously. He was not a member of Huanyu sect, he was but a little orphan that Wu Bo had taken in. Ever since then, he remained at the residence and accompanied Wu Bo, helping him tidy up the rooms. Wu Bo had never talked much about the subject, but Ah Ching had the indistinct awareness that this house had a master. Wu Bo only helped look after it. But where the master of the house was, no one really knew, nor did anyone know when they would return. Perhaps after several years, they would, or perhaps, for the rest of this life, they would not. Ah Ching had thought that the master that Wu Bo said had gone out traveling far away had already passed away in some accident. He never thought that there would come a day that the man would suddenly appear in front of them, even disguised as a woman. "Ah Ching," Wu Bo said, "go to the kitchen and prepare some joe, and then some small dishes. Lang Jun has clearly returned from a long journey. He will need something to eat so as to warm him." I'll do it right now." Ah Ching listened very well to Wu Bo. He acknowledged Wu Bo's words and then hurried off. Yan Wushi watched Ah Ching as he ran off, before removing his mi-li. "His foundations aren't bad. He's just a little stupid. Huanyu sect's people must be able to think quickly, and handle social matters with ease. He isn't qualified the way that he is. Xiren simply took him in to accompany him so as to lighten up these boring days. I would never consider such a thing," Wu Bo said, anxiously. This residence was one of Huanyu sect's strategic locations. It was purchased under Bian Yan Mi's name. Because the aliases of Huanyu sect's disciples were all surnamed Xie, every single residence was unified as a singular Xie residence. Wubo was responsible for keeping watch of this one. After having known him for several years, he did indeed come to love Qing as his own, and hoped that there would be an opportunity for him to formally become a part of the Huanyu sect. However, he absolutely did not dare bring this idea up to Yan Wushi. He had considered requesting it from Bian Yan Mei or Yu Shenjun had they ever stopped by the place, but who would have expected that neither of them would not only never come, but the great Buddha himself did, and had even told him not to even think about it. To be stupid simply means that one is not easily enticed by mere worldly possessions, Shen Qiao suddenly said. It doesn't mean that he cannot study Wuzhong wholeheartedly. I think that boy's thoughts are very pure, which is very good. If he does not end up associated with Huanyu sect, and still wants to practice Wuzhong, I could recommend him to another sect on his behalf. At that moment, he was thinking about Wuxia sect's decline after having suffered such a serious blow. Finding worthy disciples was certainly not so easy. Qing's natural talents were perhaps not worthy of those who were as ambitious as Yan Wushi, but he would be a significant addition to the Wuxia sect. Yan Wushi laughed. Qiao, I didn't see you exchange such kind graces to anyone this whole trip. If you're talking about natural talents and foundations, wouldn't that filial little boy we happened upon before be much better? Are you only saying that because you noticed how he was gazing at you, completely enraptured by your features? Because Yan Zongju is inclined to lust, Shen Qiao said, you assume that everyone else is as lustful as you are. He originally did not want to pay any attention to Yan Wushi, usually because each time they argued, he lost more often than he won. Therefore, when Yan Wushi returned to his original disposition, Shen Qiao had gradually stopped talking to him to the best of his ability. Who would have expected that he was able to manage it the entire trip, but lose restraint right here? Just as expected, Yan Wushi laughed. Lust is as natural as appetite. Everyone is like this. Indeed, I take pleasure in your features, but I am much more in love with how cold you are to me and how you ignore me. Is this not something good to be acknowledged? You've treated Xie Ling and Yan with 100 different methods of gentleness, yet you would not even dare speak half a word to me. But honestly, regardless if it's Xie Ling or even Yan, they are all a dimension of me, Yan Wushi. But if Xie Ling or Yan had shown themselves up on Wu Mi's old face and treated you with such intimacy, would you still treat them as favorably as you did before? Wu Bo, who was completely innocent and yet was dragged into their argument and, on top of this, could not determine Yan Wushi and Shen Qiao's relationship, did not dare say a word. He could only force a smile. Shen Qiao responded with a soft "N, just looking at you annoys me. Instead of speaking with you, I would much rather exchange a word or two with Xie Ling." Although Yan Wushi laughed, the smile on his face had become somewhat dangerous. Wu Bo wanted to leave, but couldn't. He only stayed there feeling awkward and embarrassed. As he listened to them speak, he could only wish that he could have just become invisible. He had been with Yan Wushi for a short period of time before. He knew very well that any time that smile showed on that man's face, then someone was sure to have a bad day. To think that, after flashing a smile like that, Yan Wushi would instead speak in a tender voice, "All right. Let's just say that I spoke out of line then. This entire trip, I let you disguise me as a woman without any complaint whatsoever. I tried so hard to be accommodating to you. Are my efforts worth so little to you that you won't even put on a good face for me? Shenzang Jiao, Duran, please have great mercy on me. I'm sure you don't want to bother with me. How often would one ever be able to see the Zongju of Huanyu sect relent and apologize to another person, with how wildly arrogant he was? Shen Qiao was caught off guard by this, not to mention Wu Bo. Shen Qiao did not respond to this. When he did speak, however, his tone was somewhat milder. I am sure that you and Wu Bo have much to speak about. I won't trouble you any longer. Is there a guest room here? I think that I will rest for a bit. Seeing that Yan Wushi did not have any objections to this, Wu Bo said, hurriedly, yes. We've tidied it up regularly throughout the year, so that one can rest in it whenever they need to. Allow me to take you there. He led Shen Qiao away and quickly returned to pay respect to Yan Wushi. To see that Zongju is safe and sound is truly fortunate. Before, I heard that you had been. I didn't dare believe it, and as expected, it was just a rumor. It wasn't a rumor, Yan Wushi smirked. I sustained a few injuries that have yet to heal. Ah, so that young man from earlier is. Wu Bo said. He is surnamed Shen, Yan Wushi said. While he is here, you will treat him the way that you treat me. Wu Bo acquiesced, not daring to ask any more. What has been the state of things on the outside during this period of time? Yan Wushi asked. News of your death has already spread across Jianghu, Wu Bo said. I did not dare to believe it, so I had even sent a message to Chang'an. But the eldest Lang Jun never responded. I heard that Hehuan sect had taken advantage of this opportunity and decided to make trouble for us. However, I kept your instructions in mind the entire time, and never exposed the whereabouts of this residence. What of Yuan Yang? Yan Wushi asked. The emperor of Zhou took to the field himself and felled the country of Qi. As of now, he is at the peak of his power, like that of the sun at noon. Even the people of Tuzhou and southern Chen do not dare cross the point of his blade. The emperor of Zhou, upon hearing of your news, had apparently sent out people to look for and bring trouble to those who had made the attempt on your life that day. However, except for the fact that the Liu Hebang may be easily tracked down, the whereabouts of the others are uncertain. Their sects are not located within the borders of Zhou, and the emperor of Zhou is not a person of Jianghu. The power of the imperial court was not enough. In the end, they were only able to issue disciplinary action against the Liu Hebang's activities. How long ago did you send a message to Chang'an? Yan Wushi asked. Last year, on the 15th day of the 12th month, during the new year. Sending a message and waiting for a response certainly could not take place so quickly. However, there was also a change that Bian Yan Mi I had run into some unforeseen events of some kind. I'll be staying here for a few days, Yan Wushi said. While I'm here, I'll wait for a response from Chang'an. You go on and get everything prepared. Do not let anyone who is not associated with us divulge any information. Yes, Zuoren. Don't worry. Although Ah Ching does not know my identity, the boy's lips are sealed, and his history is pure. He will not stir up any trouble, Wu Bo said anxiously. After personally taking Yan Wushi to his room to rest, Wu Bo left the rear court. He caught sight of Ah Ching, who was bringing over the food he had just prepared. Abo, the meal is ready. Should I bring it over to them? Wu Bo nodded. Remember, don't talk too much. Don't ask anything that you shouldn't. You can talk on and on before me, but not before Zuoren. He doesn't like people that talk too much. Ah Ching listened, but could not help but ask, Abo. Your master, the Lang Jun of the Xia residence, are they a man or are they a woman? Ah. Wu Bo's face darkened. Naturally he is a man. Can you not tell men and women apart or something? Well, how should I know? Ah Ching muttered. Sure seems like he might have a special little hobby. Looks like he gets along real well with the other Lang Jun he came here with. He said this in such a small voice, and yet Wu Bo had heard it anyway. He smacked the back of the boy's head. What are you murmuring about? Hurry up and bring their food over and shut your mouth. The more one speaks, the more mistakes they make. Silence is golden. Do you understand this or not? AO. End of the chapter. Stay tuned for more BL.